We are talking The Tomorrow War. This one is actually made by Amazon Studios and is directed by Chris McKay and stars Chris Pratt. So this is a large-scale science fiction epic movie that the sort of thing you'd expect to see playing in the cinemas right alongside the likes of Independence Day and the like. Now, this is going to be a spoiler-free review because this movie's only just come out, so I'll only give broad strokes on the plot. But essentially, it features a world which has been decimated by an alien war, but in the future. So the kind of inhabitants of our future Earth, 30 or so years in the future, just, find out a way to go back to the past and then recruit people from our present, because in the future at this point there's only less than kind of 500,000 humans left in the world, and obviously right now we've got quite a lot. So that's what they do, and Chris Pratt is one of these soldiers who is kind of drafted into this Tomorrow War, an ex-military vet, who has obviously some experience and also is now kind of a science teacher, so has a little bit of science knowledge as well. He and a group of other people sent to the future try and fight this alien menace. What will happen there? Well, you're going to have to watch the movie to find out. So, let's discuss. This, I would say, this movie feels to me like a cross between the original Starship Troopers movie mixed with aliens with a touch of Quiet Place and obviously the time travel element as well. So, what can we say that, first of all, works in the plus column? As I said, this movie feels big budget, feels very cinematic. If this were to play in the summer movie season, the cinemas and things like this, you would totally kind of like not bat an eye. It's that kind of like large-scale, world-ending kind of science fiction movies that we really enjoyed. The movie has a kind of early 2000s, 90s feel to it. And I meant the comparison to kind of something like Independence Day, because it kind of does remind me a lot of that feel of that movie, that kind of like that large-scale kind of action sequences, which we'll talk about a little bit further. But let's break it down to a little bit more detail. I think the main thing for me that I enjoyed here was the fun concept of recruiting people in the past to fight a war for a depleted human population in the future. I'm surprised no one has thought of that before. I know there's been time travel movies such as The Terminator and things like that, but it's such a kind of fun idea. I think the concept here is, it kind of gives this movie a somewhat of an original idea, that you having this kind of fish out of water experience and, parallels to kind of when people were drafted, things like the Vietnam War, obviously World War II, we had normal people kind of like being sent to this kind of war zone without any kind of real experience and things like this. So I think it really is a neat idea, a great idea, and has a good way of introducing us as the audience as a kind of entry level into the world that these kind of civilians are now having to fight in. So it makes it very kind of easy access with a kind of a neat pitch as well. So the idea of the concept, I think, is fantastic. The actual cast here, Chris Pratt, obviously a leading man, leads two major franchises, and Guardians of the Galaxy and the Jurassic World series show you why he's a leading man. I know in America he's had a few kind of political problems and stuff like that, but I do quite enjoy Chris Pratt as a kind of an actor, and he shows you he has that kind of everyman charm, but still he's believable as a kind of a military vet and things like that. As his supporting cast, I thought will do a good job here as well, making some likeable kind of supporting characters, all of who I think get a moment to shine. And they're memorable in their own rights as well. I mean, we get quite a few supporting characters, but I feel like I at least got a reasonable amount of kind of characterization from all of them, and quite enjoyed their kind of like their chemistry and things like that. The movie wisely chooses to not show us the aliens for the first third of the movie, and they've been quite reluctant to show too much in the kind of the marketing material, and I think that's good to build that anticipation. And when we do see the aliens, they are pretty terrifying, and they have quite interesting ways of defending themselves and things like this, and they're very, very vicious. They'll kind of remind you of, as I've said, they take elements from other kind of like creatures that we've seen, and I'll be reminded of, say, Starship Troopers, primarily with elements of aliens and things like that, and A Quiet Place. So those elements all kind of make the creatures, but nonetheless they are pretty terrifying, and the kind of the world that we see is well realised, I think, and it's very kind of CGI in places, but the CGI is done to a good standard. I thought the effects work here was all pretty good. It was kind of cinema level worthy effects, I would say. Maybe what can I say maybe that I didn't like so much? I think maybe the movie's a tad long. I think it could have done without one of the kind of the middle sort of action set pieces, because the last 2/3 of the movie are kind of action sequence followed by a little bit of plot development followed by an action sequence, and I would have actually liked to have seen a little bit more of when the kind of like the people from the future came back to our present and how people were reacting to them, because we don't really get a lot of that. That would have been pretty interesting. I was kind of looking forward to that, and how people would they believe it, all this sort of stuff. But it really kind of doesn't show too much of that, and I think it would have benefited from maybe cutting down a little bit on this kind of long barrage of action sequences. In a way, I suppose it reminds me in that respect of, I believe it's the third Transformers movie, where the last 2/3 of that movie is kind of one long action sequence. And there are breaks in it, but in this movie, but there's some kind of elements of the Transformers franchise that kind of reminds me of this as well. And in that respect, the action sequences sometimes feel a little bit overbloated and kind of just like a little bit silly, a little bit cartoony. In that respect, as I say, again, this is why I make the parallel to movies like Independence Day. It has a kind of a 90s style feel to it, where we have, people coming an inch away from death, and it kind of happens on multiple occasions, things like this. So it kind of is a little bit of a turn your brain off in regards to, physics and action sequences and stuff like that. But for an enjoyable blockbuster, I feel this movie delivers, and it's kind of like this sort of style of movie that we don't see these days all that much, with a likeable kind of like cast and a really good kind of concept. Like I said, it maybe isn't particularly deep and ends up being somewhat kind of like generic action sequences at points, but it's for the most part very good, very enjoyable. I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment. Look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.